Here's an idea. Every argument for pronouncing GIF is wrong, and that's okay. Recently, I was talking to someone and I said oriented, as in, let's get oriented. My interlocutor responding said orientated, which, before you get all judgy, and if we're to treat the dictionary as an authority of some kind, orientated is an acceptable alternative to oriented. Our conversation lasted 5 minutes, me saying oriented, he saying orientated, neither of us acknowledging the difference, both knowing exactly what the other meant. Just how, like, my girlfriend is English and says tomato, but I say tomato, and after many years, we continually decide to not call the whole thing off.
Oh, let's call the whole thing off.
Zero flame, calm civility. This is the dream that I have for GIF. Today we're gonna talk about the GIF pronunciation debate and how every argument for pronouncing it the way that you like is super flawed, but that's okay. First though, some oft requested backstory about Zhaif. So whether you like it or not, when you say the word GIF, especially on the internet, especially on camera, on the internet, people are gonna talk about it. Some will correct you, some will correct the people correcting you, and it is the same conversation every time, and y'all, it is boring, which is why I proposed a third pronunciation way back when. From now on, I'm gonna pronounce it Zhaif. They're animated Zhaifs. Zhaif lets people who wanna get mad feel righteous, hard G or soft G alike, so it is in fact uniting, and it lets people who don't care stand back and laugh. And every time I've said it since, the response has been remarkable and a perfect example of Poe's law. Upset pedants raging because they think Zhaif is how I believe the acronym GIF is naturally pronounced. But this brings us to a question. How did I arrive at the pronunciation Zhaif for this word? The answer involves fish. A late 19th century orthography joke first made by William Ollier, often incorrectly attributed to George Bernard Shaw, source, demonstrates how phonetically messy and contextually dependent English is by proposing an alternate spelling for the word fish. The argument goes, you could spell fish with the GH from enough, the O from women, and the TI from nation. GHOTI, fish. Zhaif is similar, though the sound to letters relationship is reversed. Its G is uncommon in English, but it's sort of like the S in casual or vision. A voiced palato-alveolar sibilant is what it's called. In IPA, that's represented by this symbol and spelled phonetically with a ZH. It's related to the DG sound from judgment and fledgling, though it is different. Really, I just went to an IPA chart to find the sound between the G of GIF and the J of GIF, and what I found was a sound that I know from the words Żywiec and Zizek. The I of GIF in Zhaif became the I sound from words like giant, title, and vial, just to cause trouble, really, since there is parity for the I sound between GIF and GIF. You know what they say, if you can't beat 'em, leave town and set up camp in the wilderness. Maybe I should have also borrowed the F from of and made it Zhaif. Zhaif, like GHOTI for fish, provides an opportunity to laugh at and use the insane contingency of the English language. And don't worry, we're gonna talk about other languages pretty soon, because seriously, whatever your argument is for pronouncing GIF the way you do, it is contingent. I'll explain, but first, we're gonna put on some soothing music to hopefully calm all the pronunciation jimmies that we're about to rustle. Item number 1, when you say GIF, someone says it's not graphics interchange format. If what we're saying is that GIF is correct because graphics is pronounced with a G, that's fine, as long as you're also gonna follow suit with other acronyms and pronounce scuba as scuba and laser as laser, which probably you're not. And that's okay. Item number 2, you say GIF and someone says, gift is pronounced with a hard G. True, but gin and ginger are said with soft Gs. There are remarkably few words that begin with GIF in English. My copy of the OED has mostly gift compounds, but it's unfair to claim J is totally unnatural for a word beginning with GI. This argument also works in reverse. Giant, gibbering, and giraffe are pronounced with a J sound, but then what about gizzards, girlfriend, and gimbal, and so on and so forth until literally the end of time. And item number 3, you say GIF and someone says, but the creator said it was GIF. So, funny story, Morgan and I were actually in the room when Steve Wilhite made his proclamation that it should be pronounced GIF. It was awesome, and if you want to say it that way because he says you should, that is rad. I respect that just like you respect Steve Wilhite's authority. However, a beauty of language is that in many, if not most situations, and pronunciation chief amongst them, usage, custom, and community are also authorities, which is why I say tomato, but Molly says tomato. It's how awful came to mean something bad, how ration became ration, how quandary became quandary, and also how the entire sound of the English language shifted after the invention of the printing press. Shameless plug for an episode of my podcast where I describe how and why that happened. Boop. In the case of GIF, if you're gonna pronounce it how the creator does because you feel that's how words should be pronounced, then there are a whole bunch of other words coined by John Milton or William Shakespeare, for example, who coined some 859 English words between them that you'll probably have to say rather differently so that your position on GIF isn't arbitrary, but also, hey, that's okay if it's arbitrary. We can admit that different pronunciations feel natural to different people for reasons beyond consistency and logic, as language, especially English, often is. By comparison, many other languages have significantly more consistent pronunciation rules. After conducting some very informal Twitter research, source, it would seem most speakers of Portuguese, Czech, German, Swedish, and Russian tend towards GIF. This is also technically the case in English. A majority of English speakers say GIF, a vast majority in the UK. In Italy and the Philippines, GIF. In Spanish and Dutch, maybe HIF, but also maybe GIF, because that's how it's understood to be said in English, and weirdly, GIF is technically a loanword from English. In French and Danish, the same controversy as English, GIF versus GIF. Oh, and in Spanish, there may be some small GIF outcroppings, meaning that they have HIF, GIF, and GIF. German could also go either way depending upon who you're with, even though according to the rules it would have to be a hard G sound. So it is mostly GIF. Same with Russian, which also has the popular diminutive gifka. Oh, and in Brazilian Portuguese it might be Giphy. Huh. About that consistency. A while back, Andy Baio made his modest proposal that GIF is the format and GIF is the culture, but it may be that the culture and format are inseparable. Wherever the format goes, its culture follows, but it would seem, as Dwight Silverman wrote for the Seattle PI, all pronunciation is local, even if the concepts and languages which represent them are global. So whether your signifier is GIF, GIF, ʒaɪf, Giphy, HIF, or GIFka, the signified is always a piece of media and something about yourself. Pronunciation has a long, complex, and well-worn history of marking personal traits, location, background, and in many ways, status. And GIF is no different. Which leads us to ask, if pronunciation encodes this info into many words, why GIF? Why is it the pronunciation beach people go to war on? PNG is meant to be pronounced ping, but most people spell it out, no torches or pitchforks. EXE is spelled, said exe, and even exec. There's even relative peace between JPEG and JPG pronouncers. The stakes for ʒaɪf seem so much higher. Why? I think because Andy was onto something. It's because there is GIF culture, or there is culture and GIFs as such play a role in it, more so than JPEGs or PNGs, more as ʒaɪfs specifically, I mean. PNGs and JPEGs are often just photos or pictures or pics. Executables are Word, Chrome, or Steven's sausage roll, not the Chrome executable. A moving, looping, silent image of Rihanna isn't anything other than a GIF. And if you told me it were some other file format, I would be shocked. I would say, no, that's a GIF. Like Kleenex, Xerox, and Post-it, their name is their format, and vice versa. Which I suppose raises a side question. If ʒaɪf is format and culture, may we eventually call things or practices GIFs, which technologically aren't? I mean, when it was first introduced, Vine was called GIF-like and often confused with ʒaɪfs. GIF is at a particular technological, cultural, and linguistic crossroads, indicating, as pronunciation often does, something about the background of the person speaking. With tomato, wooder, or cornerstore, we understand what's being indicated: geography. Maybe with the internet lacking geography in the same sense, different GIF pronunciations are not tied to substantial recognized identities or dialects and therefore excused, but are taken to indicate what authority a person respects, what they do or do not know or understand. So the stakes are higher and the argument ongoing. Perhaps needlessly, if you ask me, as long as whatever your pronunciation, the people you're communicating with know what you're talking about. What do y'all think? Why has GIF, ʒaɪf turned into the pronunciation quagmire and ongoing argument that it has? Let us know in the comments and I'll respond to some of them in next week's comment response video. There is no comment response video this week. If you missed last week's episode, it was a furthermore video about developments in copyright as it relates to Happy Birthday and whether or not you can hack your tractor and open up the computer code that runs your car. If you wanna watch that one, you can click here. We'll be off next week because we'll be in Anaheim for VidCon, so the next Idea Channel video you see will not be next Wednesday, but the Wednesday after that. We'll put a link to both my VidCon schedule and the schedule for all of the other PBS Digital Studios hosts in the description. We have a Facebook and IRC and a subreddit, links in the doobly-doo, and the tweet of the week comes from John Guerra, who responded when I asked if a jeweler had made any or all of the rings from Dark Souls, and if so, take my money, that he was doing just that, which is rad. And last but certainly not least, this week's episode would not have been possible or good without the very hard work of these giant giraffes.